Okay, UK house price index for Scotland and Fife itself. And there's other, we'll talk about all the other areas throughout Scotland as well, Glasgow and Dunbartonshire, Scottish borders over in Edinburgh, the Highlands and Islands, and we'll talk about what's going on there about there as well. But mainly we'll be focusing on the Scottish house prices, where they are in terms of the Fife house prices as well. Let me just start with the economic statement from the Office of National Statistics. This is this is the real deal. This is, you get Nationwide and you get the Halifax making their judgments on where they think house prices are according to them. But the reality is, the most important thing is the house prices according to what's actually happening on the ground, and not actually, what is just a limited market through maybe Halifax and Nationwide itself. I mean, they are the biggest lenders in the country, but they don't have all the data to hand. Okay, so economic statement from the house price index is the average house prices in Scotland have increased by 5.6%. That's the provisional estimate. You get the other data through, and it sometimes changes just slightly, not significantly though. And the 12 months to February 2024. So in Scotland, prices are up 5.6%. This was up from 4.2% in the 12 months to January 2024, in the January period, and it was higher than the UK house price annual average of 0.2 negative. So negative 0.2, the UK house price average. Scotland's actually 5.6% plus. So Scotland housing market is very, very resilient in terms of price advantage overall up to February 2024. Scotland's annual inflation rose in February because of the house price rises were falling more steeply between January and February 2023 than between January and February 2024. The rise in the Scotland's annual inflation rate in the recent months is more reflected on Scotland's average house price inflation and falling at this time last year, rather than the increasing in the recent months going on. This is known as what they call the base effect. If anybody wants to know more about that, you can just type in base effect house prices, and it should come up on Google somewhere, and you'll get a good insight into that. So Scotland's average house price fell in the winter of 2022 and 23, reaching a low point in February 2023, and Scotland's average house price returned to mid-2022 price levels by mid-2023, and has since remained competitive and comparatively stable. On a non-seasonally adjusted basis, the average house price in Scotland decreased by 0.6% between January 2024 and February 2024, compared to the decrease of 1.8% during the same period 12 months ago. On a seasonally adjusted basis, so this is the more important thing, the seasonally adjusted, the average house prices in Scotland have increased by 1.1% from January to February 2024. Now, comparing with the provisional UK house price index volume estimated for December 2023, the volume of transactions decreased by 7.6% in Scotland and by 42.3% in the UK. That is a huge drop in the housing market. That could suggest there's a lot of maybe unemployment could possibly rise slightly over the next 6 months, because to take a reduction in transactional numbers by 42.3% in the UK overall is quite a big hit. Whereas Scotland's actually still very resilient. So the Scottish economy in terms of house prices will be resilient, but will England have a knock-on effect as a result? And we'll see this coming throughout this programme as well. If you've got any questions, please feel free to ask them. I'm happy to answer them. There's things like UK inflation's obviously come down to 3.2%. UK unemployment's gone up to 4.2%. And base rates, we're not really sure. Chancellor was talking Jeremy Hunt this morning on the news about the fact that, well, it's up to the Bank of England whether base rates will actually reduce, but they're getting told off from the IMF, the International Money Federation, they're actually borrowing too much as the UK PLC, which could imply that potentially base rates might not actually come down in the next 2 or 3 months. But inflation is tipped by the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, to come down quite significantly to the target, and then probably in the next couple of months, actually. And it was announced that in the budget as well by the Chancellor. So let's talk about Scotland again. And Scotland detached house prices showed the highest annual percentage change of property types, increasing by 7.3% for detached houses in the 12 months to February 2024 to £338,000. Terraced houses showed the lowest annual percentage change, which but they still increased by 4.7% in the 12 months to February 2024 to an average price for a terraced house in Scotland of 157,000. The highest annual percentage change, and it was in Inverclyde overall, which was an average house price increase still in the Inverclyde area of 13.8% in the 12 months to February 2024 to 127,000. No surprise, that's extremely affordable, especially if the Scottish average salary is 33,000. The lowest annual percentage change was in Argyll and Bute, which actually had an average house prices had decreased by 1.9%. Now, think about that. That's only a decrease by 1.9% in a whole year right across Scotland is the lowest. There's no double digit figures here. And 1.9% is literally about 2%, which isn't really anything to be concerned about at all in terms of house price rises and house price decreases. But the average price in Argyll and Bute is actually 186,000. Now, as with other indicators, I must stress in the housing market, which typically fluctuate from month to month, it's important not to put too much weight on 1 month set of house price data. But as we can see it going out through all the months that I do in terms of the house prices when they come out, it makes a significant difference. Let's get some graphs up and talk about numbers overall and house price inflation and where that is. Let me just share the screen here. And we'll talk about the annual price change overall, and then we can drill down into some of the regions. So here's the annual price change in Scotland over the past 5 years. And you'll see there in Scotland, average house prices increased by 5.6%, which is here. But you can see where it was up at over 14% at one point in time, and then in August of 2021, and then it dropped down again in February 2022. Between February 2022 and August 2022, it actually increased again, well over 12%. But you can see it actually come down significantly. Now it's going back up and it's recovering. Why is August 2023 negative, and how is it now going up in Scotland over the last 6 months, effectively? Why is that happening? That's an interesting question I could answer in over this conversation. So in Scotland, average house prices, as I said, 5.6% to the 12 months to February 2024, up from 4.2% of the 12 months to January, which is just passed. The annual price change by local authority, here's a good one here. Let me just share this. This is annual price change by local authority. You can see your areas and your price changes. So let's just scroll through this. We start with clearly at the beginning, A, B, C, D, F, and whatever town that and city that is. So Aberdeenshire at minus 0.5%. Aberdeenshire is faring pretty well, considering that they've taken a hammering over the last 3 or 4 years. Angus still going up. Argyll and Bute, as I said, is probably the least, the one that's gone down the most, which is 1.9% down. Wow. City of Aberdeen, up 2%. City of Dundee, up 7.9%. Edinburgh, 6.6%. Glasgow, 5.5%. Clackmannanshire, 4.8%. And so on and so forth. You can see East Ayrshire, 5.6%. East Dunbartonshire, 5%. East Lothian, 7.5%. Fife, first time we've seen this, minus 0.8%. Don't panic, Fife. This is only 1 month's worth of data, and that could possibly turn around the next month. But what we're telling you in Fife is you're kind of right back at last year's prices in terms of your pricing strategy. Now, for some exceptional properties, there'll be some sort of leeway in the fact that it'll be significantly more than what it is because of what it is and where it is, especially as frontline coastal property, especially as maybe countryside properties with significant amounts of land. These are the ones that will probably more desirable because of what they can offer over and above mainstream, just like typical standard boxes, basically houses, new builds and stuff like that. But if you go back to here as well, and we can drill through it, we've got Midlothian up 8.3%, Moray 3.4%, you have North Ayrshire up 2.6%, Perthshire and Kinross 5%, Renfrewshire 7%. So you can see all the way up. Shetland and Islands minus 6.6%, but Shetland and Islands have so little in terms of their transactional numbers that it's no really taken into account because there's no that many, and it could influence. It could go vastly up and vastly down every month because the transactional number of properties sold is very, very low, as we'll see in a minute. Actually, because I've got the transactional numbers over, which actually tells you the health of the property market as well. Transactional numbers are the most important, the health of the property market overall. So we see West Lothian as well up 4.6%. Just for people in Fife, average house price 164,719. Still extremely affordable in Fife to buy a property, and especially that. And now, if you take the average house price, if you take the average salary, which is around about 33,000 according to the government, 1, 2, 3, multiply by, and then multiply that by 6. Now, the reason I'll tell you 6 is 198,000. So everything below 198,000 in that list and the average price is actually extremely affordable. 6 times multiplier has always been used over the years to gauge whether a property market is going to be quite buoyant, it's going to continue to rise in relation to the UK, in relation to Scotland as well. So if you're 6 times and below, it's more than likely a realignment up to the 6 times mark is expected overall. Now remember, it's an average. There's going to be properties round about 100,000. There's going to be properties at 60,000. There's going to be properties way up at 200, 300, 400,000. But the average actually determines overall price affordability, and it's still really affordable in all these areas because of that. We could do with base rates coming down a bit, but whether that's going to happen because of inflation and the rest of everything, the borrowing's a lot higher as well, is another question. Okay, let's come back. Annual price change. Low numbers of sales transactions in some local authorities, such as Orkneys, as I said, it can lead to volatility in that series of numbers. While the government or the house price index people, actually Office of National Statistics, can make efforts to account for this volatility. The change in prices in these local levels can be influenced by the type and the number of properties sold in any given period. Geographies with low number sales transactions should be analysed in context for the longer term trends and focus on monthly movements. So there we go. So that's the numbers that you've seen, average price in your area. Let's talk about. Let's see that in a graph form over the whole of Scotland. We'll let you have a look at that so you can see for yourself. Here we go. So here we are here. You could see there, deep red, 230,000 or more average price. You could see as it goes down and changes over to the blue, which is a lot less. You could see all the areas which are actually very keenly priced still. Dundee, Fife, down in Dumfries. You've got over there Clackmannanshire, Lanark as well over here. Glasgow area still goodly priced. Really, really high price levels are at West Lothian, Edinburgh. You can see there, and also Perth and Kinross overall. What is actually selling? Let's look at this. So, and you can see in that graph, just quickly, and before I jump onto that, Edinburgh was the average cost of 325,000, and the cheapest area to buy was Inverclyde at 127,000 overall down here. Okay, let's look at the average price by property type. We talked about this at the beginning. You can see there, detached properties are on average, they've gone up 7.3% to 338,000. Semi-detached in Scotland is 200,000, a 6.4% increase. You've got terraced, 156,000 or 157,000, 4.7% increase year on year. Flats and maisonettes, which are now starting to catch up, 4.7%, 130,000 near enough for the average price for a flat or a maisonette, which is an upper property over 2 levels, basically an apartment, but 2 levels or more, and they are coming in at 130,000 overall. But all still going up in the right direction and up at the right figures. Let's talk about sales volumes. So sales volumes, let's go on about that. What can we say about sales volumes? Well, when you look at sales volumes over the whole of Scotland, the amount of time between the sale of the property and the registration of the information varies on the register itself. It typically ranges from 2 weeks to 2 months, but it can be longer. The volume figures, therefore, are measured on December 2023 to make sure all the volume transactional numbers are through, to make sure the data and information is accurate. in comparison to everything else. So that's why it's the most important thing. So let's look at sales transactional numbers by local authority. Now, what we're looking for in trends in your area, you can see it, is where it's like for like year on year. Which means the market's pretty healthy then, if that's the case. You can see there, December 2022 for Aberdeenshire, 278 sold in the month of December, and 237 the year before. So it's actually dropped a wee bit, but not really that significant. You've looked through as well, and Angus, everybody seems to have kind of gone down a wee bit. You know, City of Aberdeen's going up transactional numbers, which actually shows that they're quite healthy. And then you've got City of Edinburgh still doing quite well, 848 versus 820 this year. And then let's look at Fife. We've got 514 versus 490. Again, Fife quite resilient then. Highlands 328 versus 309. And as we go through, there's nothing that jumps out at me and says that any of these individual areas would have a major issue with their house prices. But overall, you can see that 709.04 and 7148 minus 7904 is 756 divided by 7904 equals a drop of round about 10% in transactional numbers. Okay, so why do I talk about? Why is it important about transactional numbers and sales volumes? Well, they're actually the true barometer, the true measure of the of the UK property market, of the Scottish property market, and of your individual area's property market as well. If it stays kind of the same in terms of the number of properties sold from year to year, then you'll find local businesses will still thrive because they'll still be wanting kitchens done, they'll still be wanting bathrooms done, they'll still be wanting decorated and carpeted. So they'll all thrive as a result with the same transactional numbers, same amount of people are needing to do all that work. It's when it actually drops, then you've got to worry, because then obviously then there'll be less bathrooms getting fitted, less kitchens getting fitted, less houses getting refurbed, less painting getting done, all these different things, less mortgage brokers involved, less people in the bank, less people in the solicitors, less people in the estate agents, and that's when jobs start to suffer, and then the economy starts to suffer as a result, because jobs start to drop. Therefore, tax receipts start to drop as well. Therefore, the government doesn't get enough money for public spending to invest in public spending resources, and that's what causes the problem. So, in a housing market, you don't want dramatic swings in transactional numbers from year to year. You want maybe you want really stability in the transactional numbers. Really, in essence, the only reason it affects on the effect of house prices is if you've got a house as a second home and it's an investment. In other words, it's a rental property, because then you're only trading like for like if you live in that house. So in other words, if the property goes up 5% in your area, and you sell yours 5% higher, then the one that you're going to buy is probably 5% higher as well. So you're literally only trading like for like. That's where the transactional numbers are the most important one, because then it tells you the health of the market, and then it tells you the health of the local economy by the number of probably jobs it could still continue to support and create as a result. So that's why sales volumes are really, really important. So there is a drop of 10%, but over the UK, it's probably a huge drop in comparison. England suffers quite a lot. They have huge volatilities in terms of their house prices. In terms of what happens in England, it goes up and down and up and down. Whereas if you look at Scotland, it's a nice curve. It just goes, easily up over a period of time, and there's no huge swings up and down. Even when you look at Scotland, when the credit crunch was on, the crash was on, it doesn't affect anything over the long term as much in the graph as what you see a graph for English house prices as well overall. You notice it on the English house prices graph, but you don't really notice it that much on the Scottish house price graph. Okay, sales volumes over the last 5 years. Let me just jump onto that and let you have a look. Here we go. This is transactional numbers, as I said. This is why it's important. So in December 2023, 7,148. The year before, 7,904. Pandemic caused the problem. You've got 11,000, you've got 9,000, you've got 20,000. So 10,000 each year. That's when the huge boom started. December 2019, 8,072. We're round about, as I said, probably round about 10% lower than pre-pandemic times. And we should recover back to that. when we get a healthy market. There's been a lot of volatility, but transactional numbers and house sales, especially the number of houses coming on and the number of houses sold. I've just done something for Rightmove the other now, and they asked me to comment on the UK house price position in terms of supply and demand, in terms of house price inflation, in terms of transactional numbers. And my comments to them was basically that we're off to a good start to the year in the first quarter of 2024 for the UK house price, the UK house prices and UK housing market. So we're off to a good start to the year. The things that people need to be aware of if you're selling is price sensitivity. So what do I mean by that? We're maybe getting a lot of supply coming on. We're maybe even getting more houses getting sold than there was over the last 7-year period on average in the first quarter of 2024. But when we go to about 300,000, you see it was demand still outstripping supply up to 300,000 right across the UK. But when you get to 300,000 as a price point, it starts to balance out where demand and supply are the same, and then it drops dramatically to where supply is outstripping demand when it goes higher. This is because of availability of finance and affordability of finance at higher levels of property prices. Hence the reason why price sensitivity and price awareness needs to be taken into account. And price realization, and the fact that you have to be realistic in your pricing strategy with your agent as well. If you've been in the market for quite a while, maybe you need to revisit that and have an open and frank discussion with your estate agent about what you should be doing and how you should be doing it in order to get your house moving and get people through the door and get your house sold. After all, you're not here to sit on the market forever. There has to be a point where you'll have to, because the only thing that's probably driven you in the first place to sell your house is because of your circumstances. So how long are you going to wait before your circumstances would have to change, if anything? And that's why it's important to have an open conversation with your estate agent if you're on the market with them just now, and say, look, what do we need to get this ball rolling, to get this property moving, in order to get it sold? And it might mean a realignment in your price point as well. Nobody wants to hear that because they immediately think I'm dropping the price. No, you're realigning the price to introduce it to a new audience to push them back up. Because every single buyer usually typically has 10% more in their pocket than they're actually searching for. That's a rule of thumb, and that's always been industry standard knowledge. So just make you aware of that. If every buyer always has typically about 10% more on the budget they're telling you to put towards the price of a house. And that's the reason, because they can finance it easily. They can finance it with a bank and it's still affordable at certain levels. Okay, so let's look at this graph. Let's drop property status. This is new build versus existing resold. You'll see the stark difference here in price of new build properties as opposed to buying a property, maybe an ex-local authority house or a house that's been built for a number of years. We'll call them resold or existing resold properties. Look at this. It's remarkable. Transactions involved in the creation of new register, new builds are more complex, and it says up there. But look at this. A new build property, an average price just now in December 2023 is coming at 286,000. An existing similar resold property, it doesn't have all the insulation that the new builds have now. They're required by building standards and requirements for building control. But it's almost 100, well, it is 100, over 100,000 differential in terms of price. But look at the annual price change. A new build has gone up 19%. Now, is that the very fact that the price of materials has gone up, therefore the new build has had to actually go up to match that because of the price of materials is actually going up? It's interesting because when you look at the inflation figures, they've dropped to 3.2%, but they're not saying that prices are dropping. They're just saying they're less than they were before. Not really sure what that means, but that's what they're trying to tell you. Although fuel costs have gone up, but it's food prices that are dropping. I've got to call out Tesco's on this. You can't make 750 million and say you're helping people with the cost of living crisis. I think it was Tesco's. It's like, it's a bit hard one to swallow. Anyway, back to this. Okay, so property status, and then we can jump on to first-time buyers. What first-time buyers? First-time buyers on average are paying 150,000 for a property. That's going up by 5.1%. Former owner-occupiers are paying slightly more at 227,000 or 228,000 for a property, going up 6.1% in the year-on-year. Now, that's no surprise because the former owner-occupiers have equity built up in their existing property. Therefore, they're able to buy a higher price point because they're now on the property ladder and they can upgrade as a natural result of that. And also the fact that they've probably paid down most of their mortgage as well between the time of being a first-time buyer and their next move. And so that's why there's a differential. But just to make you aware, first-time buyers are on average 150,000 now. So if you've got a £120,000 property, or if you've got a £80,000 property, you can still target first-time buyers for that. As a result, it's long gone are the days that's like, I think my first-time buyer property was £20,000 and I struggled to get that. But that was a lot of years ago in the late 80s. Just shows you how far things have come on in terms of financing, possibly creative financing as well. So how are they funding all this? How are people funding these? Let's look at funding status. Where's it all coming from? Well, cash buyers are typically buying at 171,000 if they're a cash buyer on average across Scotland. Mortgage holders are typically buying at 196,000 because they're using a mortgage to leverage their position and get a bit more money towards buying a property. So you can see that right there. So if you've got somebody coming along as a cash buyer, this is telling you, you're probably less likely to get a higher price than you are somebody using a mortgage. That's a good tip. So that's where they're doing in terms of the funding status. And that's it, guys. Hopefully you've got a good insight into that, into the Scottish house price market, into your local regional market as well, and also into the Fife property market overall. If you've got any questions later on, please feel free to ask. Just stick them in the comments, or you can message me direct on these posts. Until next time, guys, I'm Jim Parker for Fife Properties.